Sawadika. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome you all to the second ThaiNOG. My name is Assistant Professor Dr. Wachanan Matithanon will be the MC for today's. The event today consists of the half-day conference and half-day tutorials, which organized by local Thai organizations, which are Thai Network Information Center Foundations, or THNICs and ThaiREN together. With support from many local and international organizations, you will find many interesting topics, including the OTT challenge, RouteViews evolves network disaster recoveries. For who may need the internet access and Wi-Fi passwords, is written on the backs of your badge. Now is the time for opening ceremonies. I would like to invite Associate Professor Dr. Panjai Tantatsanawong to give the opening speech. Welcome.
Good morning and สวัสดีครับ Paul Wilson Director General ICANN John Crain Chief Security Stability and Resiliency Office of ICANN Professor กาญจนา กาญจนสุด Vice Chairperson of THNIC Honorable Speakers ThaiNOG members Distinguished guests Ladies and gentlemen Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank you for all for your continuous support to the ThaiNOG. ThaiREN stands for the Thai Research and Education Network. It's a research community consists of two networks, Uninet and ThaiSAN. This is my pleasure to very happy to see the growth of the Thai network operator groups or ThaiNOG. ThaiREN and ThaiNOG share the same objectives to collaborate with the local community, as well as to develop technical and operational staffs who run the networks by exchanging knowledge and information among the members. It is my great pleasure to see that we are all here together again for the second ThaiNOG Days 2019. As always, our event agenda is fully furnished with facilitated topics from expert speakers. It is our most advantage to hear from them today, and it is our great honor to have John Crain from ICANN and Paul Wilson from ICANN with us as a keynote speaker. Please make the most out of today's session and continue to develop better internet services. This event could not be successful without generous support from our sponsor and speaker. Please join me to thank Symphony, the Network Broadcasting and Telecommunication Commission or NBTC, ICANN, Facebook, Netflix, NTT Communication, TCC Technology, 3BB, Akamai AWS Internet Thailand Internet Society SuperNet Thailand The Expert Technologies and Services Ford Thailand SPOA Bangkok Neutral Internet Exchange or BKNX Cisco NSRC and .th Registrar. And we would like to thank the great supporters, our fellowship from AWS and ISOC, who support the two fellowships from two countries, Cambodia and Myanmar. On behalf of ThaiREN and Thai Network Information Center Foundation, I would like to officially welcome everyone to ThaiNOG Days 2019. I wish the ThaiNOG members a faithful meeting and have wonderful moment together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Panjai, for opening speech and opening remarks. Next, I would like to invite Mr. John Crain. The keynote speaker is the Chief Security, Stability and Resiliency Office at ICANN. He will talk on DNS hijacking attacks. Everyone, please welcome John Crain being on the stage.
Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here at ThaiNOG. Some of you here in Thailand know me quite well. I've been here many times. I am not David Conrad. He sends his apologies. He couldn't make it today. And for my sins, I had to get on a plane and be here at 2 o'clock this morning. So I said, come talk to you. So the subject is DNS hijacking. And I wonder if any of you have been following the news about some international hijacks that happened. Well, they hit the news earlier this year, but they've been going on for about a year or so. So, a lot of reports in the press. I'm going to leave these slides so that you can go click on the URLs and go to some of these. The basic reports were that top-level domains were being hijacked. That domain name servers for those top-level domains were being pointed elsewhere and that bad guys were siphoning off data. The targets, well, it depends on what you define as the target. So the infrastructure that was attacked were fairly large providers within Europe and other parts of the world. The targets appear to be mainly in the Middle East, targeting Middle Eastern governmental and business entities. So, top-level domains, DNS, obviously that's what ICANN does. So, how did we get involved? Well, normally when something like this happens, telephones start to ring. So we saw a couple of things in the press. I got a series of telephone calls from people involved in tackling this issue. And we also got notification from a country code top-level domain. So country code top-level domains for Thailand is .th. This was not .th. It was actually a different Asian top-level domain administrator that came to us and said, we need to make some emergency changes. Our name servers have been compromised. We need to rename them, renumber them, etc., because basically we've been attacked. This attack was not a single point in time. Right? So when you read the press things, you think, well, this is something that happened on a particular days. This was going on for months. Many months undetected, and is partially still ongoing. Right? So these types of attacks, possibly the same actors, are still active today. Right? So it's not a point-in-time thing that happened and we can all forget about. So the first thing that you do when you're involved in events, how many people here deal with events and emergencies, either in their CERT or their operations teams? A few of you. So the first thing you need to do is figure out what's hearsay, i.e. what are you just hearing and what you actually know. So we heard lots of things. If you read the press, there was talk of 12 top-level domains being hijacked, registrars being compromised. There was even some discussion of root servers possibly being compromised. This was all hearsay, right? We didn't have any facts for that. So we went out and the first thing we had to do is figure out what was real. So it does turn out that indeed there were around a dozen TLD operators that appear to have been affected, mostly in the Middle East, but also in other places. Only a few of them came to us for emergency changes and told us that they had been affected. So there was only 2 or 3 of them that we actually know were part of this attack. Others, where we have data indicating they were part of the attack, made changes without telling us why. So we're pretty sure that those numbers are probably pretty accurate. We know that at least one registrar was indeed compromised because I had conversations with them. In fact, I was the one who told them they'd been compromised. So that was an interesting conversation over a cup of coffee of, hi, how's your day going? Not as well as you think. It was a good day. It was fun. And we asked the RSAC to confirm that none of the root ops had actually, RSAC is our advisory committee on the root server system, that none of the root ops had been compromised. And initially 8 of them came back. Over time, the rest of them came back and said, nope, not affected. So what does this attack look like? The bottom line is the important one here. It's not sophisticated. It's not particularly hard to do, but it is well coordinated. So the first thing they did was, for one area of the attack, because there were multiple vectors and multiple areas of attack, was compromise credentials, right? If you're a network engineer, you probably know lots of ways that people can compromise credentials, both technically and through social engineering. I'm not going to go into how they were compromised, but there were credentials compromised to people who had access to name servers related to ccTLDs. Once you have access to the DNS, it's pretty easy to go and register a SSL certificate. Docomo, Let's Encrypt, those were the 2 that were used in these attacks. Pretty easy to go there and get a certificate for that name, especially if they only check by email, because you own the DNS, and if you own the DNS, what do you own? Pretty much everything, right? So they now can do HTTPS, so that gives them more access. Set up proxy servers to pass through traffic. So if you've been hacked in this way, you may or may not know. Right? Your traffic may go down for a while and it may not, because if it's through a proxy, they'll pass a lot back forward to you. Also, they were making these changes for very short periods of time. So the typical time that they were doing the changes to the DNS for would be 59 or 60 minutes. Some were longer. The time they used seemed to be dependent on the processes at the TLDs, how often they refresh their zones. So they would do it for one zone change and then put everything back on the next one. So they were avoiding detection by just being a little bit smart and not being too aggressive. Change the A records for the MX servers. They can start getting people's mail, which means they can start getting other things like other credentials. So the attack was against infrastructure, but what they were doing was they were harvesting credentials. Now, if you can do this pretty easily against a particular registration or name, you can also do it a little bit wider. So how about, instead of just changing a particular name, how about you change the name server records or the IP addresses for name server records for a TLD? Now, if you look at the names of TLD name servers, they're not always within the TLD. Right? So this is not a compromise per se of the TLD's namespace, i.e. .xx for a ccTLD, because then you would come to IANA and need to change things. But if you have name servers that are under somecompany.com, like ns.somecompany.com, and you get control of somecompany.com, then you can change the A records and you can start pointing those to different places, and the name servers are redirected, not the TLD itself. So, once again, harvesting credentials. And of course, if you get access to the name server records, so you can redirect the queries, you can answer with whatever you want. Right? So if I come to you and say, I want to answer MX records or mail server records for some government agency.gov.th, I can do that. And this is what they were doing, not in .th, but in other CCTLDs, so in the Middle East. So they were harvesting credentials for all kinds of government agencies, mainly in the Middle East, some of them also in Eastern Europe, but mainly the Middle East. So, because this allows you to target any name within that TLD. And of course, if you're smart, and these guys appear to be smart, you proxy this, and then you only answer with the wrong A records for the names you're interested in, or the wrong MX records. You no longer do it wider across the TLD, but you only do it for the people you're interested in, and you pass everything else back to the original name servers. So the people managing those name servers, how many of you here actually keep an eye on the query rates at your name servers? Yeah, you probably should, right? But in this case, you might not have noticed because they were being very specific and targeted about who they were after. So if you're the CCTLD operator and you're monitoring your name servers, you would probably see a very, very small drop in queries and you wouldn't notice it. So, interesting times. So what do we do at ICANN? Well, we do the same as any other organization, I hope, is we wake up our crisis management team. Most network organizations have these. Try and understand what's happening in the situation. Remember, I talked about hearsay versus facts. They have this thing they call the fog of war, but I guess this is the fog of being hacked or the fog of the press. There's a lot of stuff out there that just isn't correct. We worked with the person we call the reporter. That was the individual that discovered the attacks and had access to much of the data. We were very fortunate that specifically my team worked quite heavily with the operational security community, and we're on the same mailing lists as these people, so they reached out to us. So to figure out what was happening, and then we had to reach out to affected parties. As I said, I had to tell one of the registrars that he was having a bad day. We had to tell a few TLD operators they were having a bad day. But it was interesting. Because remember I said this is just one vector of the attacks. At ICANN, we're interested in the DNS hijacking. But these people had also managed to break into telecom systems. They had control of, or at least access to, some major telecom providers in the Middle East. So how do you communicate securely with somebody in an event like this? A lot of people don't have encryption technology in place. How many people here use PGP and share the keys? Only a few. What do you use? S-MIME? Do you use, what's your encryption technology? Do you have that in place? More importantly, do you know what the encryption technology and the communication methods are with the people you need to communicate with? Now, there is a list, a secure mailing list, if you like, with all the TLD operators. Fascinating how many emergency contacts are desk phones that don't get answered in the weekend. If you're going to attack somebody, do it in the weekend or during a holiday. I spent a lot of time talking to answering machines. Probably not the best way to do things. So we reached out to individuals, and we also used mechanisms like that mailing list and other mailing lists and our own security contacts to inform people in the industry. So we sent out messages to all the TLD operators, all the registries, all the registrars, basically saying you might want to go read some of these press releases. Because some of the press releases, for example, the Krebs on security list and a few other ones, the Talos one, were pretty accurate and gave you a very good idea of the kind of threats you could face. And we've included those in the slide. So go read them and see the kind of things that were going on. We published an alert, actually 2 of them. One of the things we called for in the title, but not in the body of the message, I love press people, both ours and everybody else's, was to think about fuller deployment of DNSSEC. Some of this may have been noticed if people were validating DNSSEC records. Not signing, because some of these zones were already signed. But like any of these technologies for authentication, they require the other side to be authenticating. It turns out that a lot of people don't authenticate DNSSEC signed responses. There's another technology out there called DMARC for mail. Turns out that a lot of people don't authenticate DMARC either. I had a notification just this week of somebody doing a phish saying they were ICANN.org, and it failed everything in DMARC, but these people aren't validating, so it doesn't really help. But we had a few other things in there. So ICANN's role in this is because we're at the center of the DNS system. It's a distributed system, right? Nobody runs the internet. Nobody runs the DNS. Nobody's in control of it. It's very diverse. Many people take part in it. And almost nobody wants to spend any money on this stuff. How many of you here have more security budget than you want? Yeah, right. Doesn't happen, right? How many of you have an express budget for securing your DNS? Yeah. So nobody wants to spend money, so that's kind of a problem. There's very little that ICANN can actually do in this role. We can advise people. We can notify people when we find things out. We can talk to our registries and registrars about maybe increasing the security stance in our contracts, but that's a two-way negotiation, so that's going to take time. But what we can do is help promote best practices. Now, the wonderful thing is that most of the things that occurred in these attacks would have been helped if people were actually doing some of these best practices. Many of them already exist. The Security and Stability Advisory Committee at ICANN actually has a number of recommendations that if people had been implementing them, they would have been less vulnerable. And once again, we'll share the slides. There's a lot of speculation about who is doing this, right? Is it state actors? That's most of the supposition. There are various state actors that always get blamed whenever anything happens. Attribution on the internet is really, really hard. So we don't actually know. The main lesson for me, or one of them, is that these people, whoever they are, maybe not sophisticated, maybe that's the wrong word, but well organized and well resourced. When you looked at the way they were attacking, and if you looked at the traffic patterns, this was not an individual. It wasn't even one group. It was multiple groups doing concerted efforts to attack infrastructure. So, I hate to use this word, but these guys are professionals. Whether they are organized crime, state-sponsored, or some other form of organized players, This is not some kid sitting there hacking at it. This is a professional attempt at hijacking infrastructure. So don't underestimate the opponents out there. They are well-resourced, they are smart, and they probably know more than we think they do. Think about the way they did their timing of changes. That didn't just require an understanding of the DNS. They were very specific. They actually took the time to understand the timings in particular operators and who operated what and where. They'd done their research. And as I said, these people are still active. So, how many of you consider yourselves infrastructure operators? Well, if you're a network operator, you are. Right? So you may not consider yourself that, but you are. Your data, or more importantly, your customer's data, has value. It has value. That was pretty cool. Yeah. And you may not actually understand that value. Right? You might be running services for a smaller operator who may be running services for a government agency or a financial agency. So you may not even understand the value of your customer's data. The emails of military officers in Middle Eastern countries were apparently compromised, including high-level governmental officials. Right? There was access to that kind of stuff. You may not know who your customers are particularly and how valuable or where they sit in the path towards valuable data. And this is one of my favorite quotes, and I used to always say this myself, but I've actually found somebody fictionally that said this, and that's, you're not paranoid if they're out to get you. Right? Everybody always says I'm a little bit paranoid, but I'm not. If they're really out to get you, it's not paranoia. It's just being aware. So be aware that, A, you're under attack. How many people here run networks and think they are under attack today? Okay, you either don't run networks or you're a little misinformed because everybody's under attack every day. And I've heard other people say that not only are you probably under attack, but you're probably compromised and don't know it. Now, I think that may be a little bit too paranoid, but it's probably not a bad attitude to have when looking at your network. Worry about whether or not you've been compromised and what you're going to do. So what else can we do? We talked about best practices. So I'm going to leave you with a list of things that we said would be useful. And some of these, in fact, pretty much all of these, have been around for a long time. And if you're not doing them on your network, you might want to ask yourself why. So I did check. We do all of these. Well, it'd be really embarrassing if I found out that we didn't do one of these. So I went and shouted at our network engineers and said, we've been telling you for years to do these. Do you actually do all of these? And of course, one of the first things we looked at when we heard about these attacks was, have we been attacked? Right? They're attacking infrastructure. Wouldn't it be cool if they attacked us instead of everybody else because we'd be a prime target? Unfortunately, we have a lot of things in place. Now, you're never 100% guaranteed, but we had most mechanisms in place, and we did actually go through every single transaction on our network. Our IT security guys weren't happy. They had a very long few days making sure that we hadn't seen any unexpected traffic into or out of our network. So one of the ways they got into one of the registrars was through a unpatched media platform, i.e. a blogging platform. They're called stepping stones. Just because it's not a critical service doesn't mean you can not patch it. And it wasn't unpatched for long. They told me, and I believe them, that they patched it a few hours after the release of a patch. But these guys got in before. These guys were professionals. But you need to keep stuff up to... Everybody here has everything on the networks patched up to the current date, right? Yeah, right. It's no good logging things if you don't have mechanisms for review and alerting you, right? So make sure somebody's managing the logging, looking for intrusion, and there are intrusion detection systems, etc. you can purchase to automate some of this. I mean, most of these are, sufficient password complexity. Passwords are so last century, right? But if you're going to use passwords, make them complex and then do multi-factor. It turns out that in our industry, the DNS industry, some of the registrars don't provide multi-factor at this moment. And that's kind of weird. So when you're providing services as network operator, whether it's DNS or anything else, always think about whether or not you should deploy multi-factor to your customers, because it's not hard. Yeah, it might have been 10 years ago, but today it's easy. I'm not going to go through all of these because they are, pretty common. How many people here monitor their DNS records, their WHOIS records, and their DNS data on a regular basis? Well, let me tell you, no matter how regularly you're doing it, it's probably not enough. Right? Most of the people I know in the security field watch for changes to the WHOIS. There were no WHOIS changes here. And they watch for changes to the DNS on a daily basis or every 6 hours or so. These guys figured that out and were underneath that. But you should at least be doing something to watch that. How many of you actually go through the SSL certificate lists that get published of new SSL certificates looking for your names? We do that. It's a pain. But you probably should. Right? That data's out there. You can automate some of this. There are companies that will sell you that service if you don't want to do it yourself. Right? But most of us in the industry aren't doing the basics. And that's a problem. As I said, DNSSEC sign if you can. How many of you operate resolvers for your customers? Pretty much all. If you're network operators, you probably are. Think about turning on DNSSEC validation. Even if you're not going to sign or allow your customers to sign, at least allow them to validate those that have signed. It's a flag in the configuration of most DNS software today. It tends to be default off, but you can turn it on pretty easily. So think about doing that. If you're not going to do DMARC yourself for your email, which I suggest you should think about doing, then at least make sure that your email servers, etc., are validating, so that if you get a failure on DMARC, you don't just accept the email, that you do something with it. So I guess the message here is we still have a lot of basic security work to do, all of us. So with that, I think my time is up. So I'd like to thank you. I'll thank David Conrad for not turning up at this early hour of the morning. And I'm going to be around for a while for questions if anybody has them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, John Kane, for your speaker this morning. The next speaker, I would like to invite Kam Sze Yeung. He is the principal network architecture at Akamai. He is going to talk about the OTT challenge. Please welcome.
Hello, good morning. Yeah, so my name is Kam. I'm one of the network architects of Akamai. So today I'm going to talk about the OTT challenge. So I think If you have attended the session yesterday, you know that the video traffic is growing and the OTT traffic is also growing. But Akamai is a CDN that we are delivering the OTT content every day. So we do see some challenges, and we'd like to share some of the experience with you guys today. So this is what the topics that I'm going to cover today. I'm going to do a little bit of introducing Akamai, just in case you don't know. And then the OTT part, what the challenge, what trend that we're observing, and then how do we mitigate them on all this, and then how the ISP, the operator, could work on all these OTT challenge together. So Akamai is a CDN platform, so we have an intelligent platform that consists of a lot of distributed servers to serve the content to the closer to the end user. So this is the statistics that we have. So we have more than 23,000 servers and more than 390 locations worldwide. Of course, in Bangkok, we do have a lot of servers location here in Thailand also. And we are serving a lot of traffic on day-to-day, and we just have a record that end of last year that we have over 70 terabit of second of traffic that we deliver. So this is a traffic snapshot that you can actually download an app on your phone, or you can actually go to our website to check this. So now go to the topic. So what's OTT? So I think you heard of these terms nowadays very often, because a lot of traffic on the internet nowadays are OTT content, right? So, but if you look at the definition, that this is actually a copy from the Wikipedia. So an OTT is in a broader sense, this OTT is usually referring to the audio and video content or media content like files download, software patch, that over the internet without the emotion of a MSO. So for the control and distribution of content. So if you look back, I'm not sure about Thailand case, but you think about that, a lot of content that in the broadcasting is actually over, in the past, it may be from your, let's say, your cable TV provider, you have a set-top box, or it's through your IPTV provider that they have an IPTV system, and then you have a set-top box on your home, and then to consume all this content. So these are not, this is like content distributed by the MSO, usually the cable operators by themselves. But the landscape is changing. You see like Netflix, for example, they are just simply streaming over the internet. So these are one of the OTT content example. So the ISP, the operator, may not be aware of this content because they're just simply transporting the underlying, the IP layer to the end users directly. So from a operator point of view, you only see the traffic, the packets going to from a content providers to an end user, but you don't control the traffic. You don't know what the users are viewing, and then they could be like a live streaming, or it could be a video on demand, this type of content. So, so OTT is actually referring to the content that a third party that deliver to an end user, just simply over the IP transport. So there's a lot of this kind of content happening. So I'm sure that there's a lot of people watching like dramas every day, and then on your iPad or on your phone. So these are all directly from the content providers, the OTT players, directly to the end user. So what's the challenge that that as a CDN provider that we are delivering all this OTT content? So number one is you think about the OTT content is actually directly from the content, the server, the edge server, the CDN server to the end user. But this actually involves a lot of components in between to deliver the video. It's not simply like a file from a server to a client. It's just that simple. But you think about that, the broadcaster, the origin players have to like encode, do all the encodings to transform to different format, because now we have so many different file formats, streaming format, and also different device, and they all have a different encoding formats. And of course, for Akamai, like CDN, that we responsible for taking the origin content, that the ingest part, and also the delivery part. The local carrier, that the operators, they are the one that who deliver the content, so they are the one that who responsible for the last mile and the first mile. So if we have a high throughput server, but the last mile is a very low bandwidth, then we still cannot deliver the OTT. And the end user they are looking for a device. So nowadays, if you think about that, if you want to watch a 4K video, then you need a high-spec phone that you can have that kind of resolution to watch the video. So the end user also have to take control of the device. If you can't just a feature phone, then I can't watch a 4K video, right? So these are all the components for us to deliver the OTT content. So now there are so many components involved, and this is so complex. Then now the challenge is actually who is actually looking after all this performance. There are so many components. Of course, so I mentioned that there are so many players in the OTT traffic, and all of us actually have to part of this to look after that. So, for example, like the operators, like I think if you are a telco or a operator, then you are the one that who actually looking for the assets part that for your end user. So you think about the expectation. I mean, to deliver a good content for OTT, then you have to think about from an end user point of view and the content owner point of view. So the fonts may be a little bit small, but you think about if you are an end user, you consume the OTT content, what would you expect? So you expect that, okay, I can access the video content from anywhere, so I can have it on my phone, have it on my laptop, or any device, and I want the video to be streamed smoothly, so there's no rebuffering time. I want the video to load quite quickly. I don't want to wait 30 seconds to load a video, right? And I want to have all the content that I can consume, either they are pay or they are free content. So I want to have a large variety of different content that I can watch. They're like a huge library of catalog. And of course, I want them to move in, to watch them on a high resolution. So nowadays, I think most of the newest phones that they can support 4K. But we are talking about like 8K, for example, like the Olympic coming in Japan, they're thinking about to broadcast in 8K video. So, and then, so I mentioned about that, the charging. So from a content broadcast provider, I mean, the content owner point of view, what are they expect to deliver a good OTT content? So, of course, they want the content to be support to all device, all formats. So that means all users can consume that. So what that means, they have to consume that in, they have to encode that in all different formats. Flash, Silverlight, iOS, Android, HTML5, all this video encoding format. They want the traffic to be delivered anytime at scale. So what that means, if I have a live concert, very popular, I don't know, like K-pop is popular here, I don't know. But if you have a live concert and then you want to do an OTT content broadcast, then it's only for lasting for a few hours because the concert is only for a few hours. I want the provider to deliver the content at scale, so I can easily jump up like, I don't know, 100 gig, 1 T traffic anytime. I want to have the engagement with the audio with the audience, because as long as they watch longer, then I can, if you have free content, usually they insert advertisement, right? Or if it is, if they are playing the video is smooth, then they would just repeatedly consume the same content. So I want to make sure that the audience have good quality. I will measure all the metrics that deliver all this video. Same thing that I want to deliver the high video, because high resolution video tends to have higher retention rate for people to repeatedly consume that. I want to monitor the contents, either like it's pay subscription or it's a free content, but I insert an advertisement, so I get the revenue from the advertiser also. So, and I want to have all these encryption to prevent my videos being like people to share the URL and I can watch the content. So I want to have this the content to have all these media security embedded, like HTTPS, user authentication, token authentication, all these things. So there's a lot of things that involved in delivering from a different perspective, the end user and the content. They all have a expectation on how do we deliver a good OTT. So this is the trend that we are observing. So here is the online event in the last decade that this is Akamai statistics. So you can see that what traffic that we have been delivered. This is all public data that you can see. So from a few years ago that we have the US election day, and 2008 we have the golf tournament, and then up to like 2 years ago when the US inauguration day, then we have observed like 8.3 terabit of traffic during a peak time. So now you can make a guess, like say last year we have a record about the World Cup streaming. So anyone want to make a guess about how much traffic that we stream in the peak traffic for the World Cup that we have last year? So we are delivering like 23.8 terabit of traffic for the FIFA World Cup last year. Of course, we expect that the traffic is still keep going, but you can see the trend is actually going rapidly. So a lot of people, they turn to watch content through the OTT instead of like traditional like broadcasting TV, because they want to consume the content anytime, anywhere. So if you want to watch a World Cup football, then you may want to watch it like outside with friends rather than sitting at home, right? So all these are required that you have the OTT content to be consumed anytime, anywhere. So you can see the user that we have, concurrent user that we can deliver last year is like 9.7 million of concurrent user for the World Cup event. Of course, some of the World Cup broadcasters, they still broadcast that on a traditional TV, but this is actually only referring to the broadcaster that using the OTT over the internet. So the actual user, of course, to watch the World Cup is much more, because some watch on the traditional TV. And this is an example of, another example of how the traffic is the trend that we have. So this is data that I showed last year also. The cricket event, I'm not sure, I think you guys may not be that familiar with cricket, but it is a national sport for Indian, and Indian is a huge population. So when we stream the cricket video in India, you can see that there's over like 10 million of concurrent view. And in fact, the cricket is actually happening at this moment. And you can see that we can still observing the same trend, that we have more than like a lot of concurrent user that for this kind of famous sport event. Of course, this is more particular to the country that have that fancy for this sport. Yeah. So you can see that the traffic pattern that we observe nowadays is, from an operator point of view, because it's not like normal like a curve nowadays, because the user will consume any different content at any time. So this is a traditional pattern that I think if you're an operator, then you observe this kind of traffic pattern, that you have a peak time at the night time, because when everyone go home and then they browse the internet, they watch the video, right? So this is a traditional traffic pattern. Now, if you think about that, from a corporate internet, an enterprise network, that peak time would not be at the night time because people go to the office to work. So they would be like more peak in the morning when everyone go to the office and they check email, download things. And the noontime is a bit job because people go out for lunch, etc. And then on the mobile internet, you will see that the traffic pattern would be like this. In the morning, everyone, when they commute to the office, then it's a peak time. Everyone is watching news on the cars, and then during lunchtime when they go out, then they also like keep updating with friends, keep checking, and then in the afternoon, then when they leave the office, then it's another peak time when they go back to the office. You guys are, I think, at least for me, usually like browsing on the internet when I'm on the way home. So you think about it, if you're an ISP that you provide all these you have all these three different types of users, then you have different traffic pattern. And if you aggregate all together, you see a traffic pattern like this. So in the morning, then you have people that on the mobile user and the enterprise user, and then the nighttime, then you have people consuming internet at home. So this is like the pattern that we observe. But with the OTT content, then the traffic pattern would change. So, for example, this is the OTT streaming that And for event that when it go up, everyone will watching it, but then when the event finish, then everyone just stop watching that because the event finished. And if you're watching video, VOD, for example, people usually spend weekend. I mean, this is what we observe. People spend weekend at home to watch video content, the VOD content. That what I mentioned before, the cricket event, when it's going to live streaming, this is something like this. You see that like 2 peaks because there's a break time in between. So, and also sometimes the traffic depends on how exciting is that match. So if the first match is boring, then people may just stop. Or if this is exciting, then people will continue to watch in the second match. So this is the pattern that we observe for like cricket event. There's a session gap in between. So now you see that we have people watching different content at different time, and then there are streaming event, VOD content, and then all together, the traffic pattern will be something like this. And from an operator point of view, you only see traffic pattern like this because you only see the IP packet. You don't know what are the content itself. So let's say if you are an Indian operator, you will see traffic pattern like this. The peak is the cricket event. So with the change of the OTT, like the traffic volume and the traffic pattern, then you see that there's some challenges that we are facing. Number one is Akamai, we do not own the content. So we actually sometimes, even myself, I do not know when there's a live event happening. So sometimes the traffic could simply just burst, or there's a software download, or a new game release. These are all new different traffic pattern. So as a content provider, as a CDN, we have to deliver content in different formats. So this is also a challenging part because different format require different type of server to deliver all this. And for the broadcast, we also need to do the pre-packaging and post-packaging. And sometimes some video content that they want a security that they want to deliver HTTPS, so that's actually more consuming from the server point of view because we have to do a lot of decrypting and encrypting of that. Yeah. And sometimes we also have to do the IP address geo IP association because usually the broadcaster, they only got a content wide for a particular countries. So, and if they are using a CDN, then CDN is the one that who have to have an accurate geo IP information so that we make sure that only that countries users could consume the content. So from our infrastructure deployment point of view, because we have all these different features that we have to deliver, so there's a lot of resources that we require on our servers. Also in terms of the display. So if it's a live streaming event, because everyone is watching the same video content, because it's basically a small video segment. So everyone watching the same content, then it's a very short live, it's very high offload ratio because. But if you think about VOD, then this is a huge library because a content owner, they may have over thousands of video content, and every file content may be a few gigabytes, and you can think about that. Everyone is watching the different content at different time. So what we have to do is that we have to make sure that we have enough disk space to cache all these video contents. To make sure that we don't run into a cold cache issue and we're able to fetch the content from the origin, then this increasing the rebuffering rate. Yeah, and then different ISP have different traffic pattern, so that sometimes we may not be able to cope with them because with let's say their maintenance time or their backbone traffic routing, etc. So there's a challenging for us in terms of the server and the traffic that we have to do. So what we have to do is, number one is that we have to improve our hardware. So now we have the next generation hardware that we have is actually higher throughput. So we have going from 1 gig to 10 gig interface. And the newest one that we have is actually 100 gig interface. That's coming out, I think, end of this year. That we have 100 gig interface server to deliver the content. We're trying to pack the server as small as possible. So that it's more power efficiency. So we have server that with half view size. And And then of course we have to keep improving on the power consumption, and then we're trying to also using larger disk size, because when the SSD become the more commodity, then we can actually buy more large size SSD too, so that we can cache more content. So this is a graph that how do we do in terms of the network efficiency, in terms of the energy efficiency that we have. Of course, this is the hardware part, and then we also have the software that we have to optimize to deliver the content. So we do protocol optimization. So I think you heard of Crain, or even the HTTP. I think they just renamed to HTTP. And we deliver through both TCP and UDP, because UDP tend to be quicker. You don't need all these handshake. But you have to make sure that the underlying, the last mile is good. So you have to detect whether the last mile is good, and then you can change to adopt to different protocols, and different bit rate, because different operators have different last mile for their access. Sometimes if you want to consume a 4K, but then you don't have enough last mile access, then we just automatically adapt that to into a lower bit rate, let's say 1 meg or so. Yeah, so these are some of the examples that we have. And we have a broadcasting center that monitoring all this content. Yeah, so when it comes to handling all this challenge, so I think the approach that we have is how do we mitigate this? Is number one is that we work with the ISP, telling them that, hey, if we are going to have an event or how much traffic that we are forecasting, so we build enough capacity with the ISP. We constantly reviewing our traffic profile, and then so that the ISP understand that, hey, why there's a traffic surge or traffic drop. We try to localize the traffic so that it's preventing a lot of what we call off-net traffic, because otherwise when you go to the upstream, then I think usually the operator don't have much bandwidth in the upstream, so that if the traffic overflow, then it's an issue. Of course, we do pair with a lot of IX, so that when the cache fail or overflow, then we have second path too, so that we can deliver the content. And we also encourage people to turn on IPv6, because if you're running a CGNAT, then there's a translation, there's some overhead in terms of performance of CGNAT. For example, like in India with Jio, I mean, it's a huge mobile operator. So we observe that if we deliver the content over V4, the CGNAT actually go up a lot in terms of the CPU resources. So then we have to change that to V6, because a lot of the end users are just mobile, and then they're just using V6. And that's what Akamai do. And then as an ISP, what we can do, so you have to understand your end user, because what type of content that your end user would consume. You have to understand that you could monitor your end user performance, like your throughput, latency, things like that. And you would understand that what's popular content that in your country or in your end user would consume. So are they fancy for Netflix, or they want K-pop, or they want to watch live content? So this type of traffic pattern that you have to aware. If they are gamers, then there will be a lot of gaming download, for example. We also encourage them that you attend the conference and NOG, so that you can understand all this new trend and then talk to all these OTT players. I think we have some here. Then you can talk to them about how you can cooperate with all these CDN players. Not only Akamai, but you can work with all these CDN players, because different CDN players carry different content and they have different network requirements. Yeah, so this is something that I want to share with you guys today. So in conclusion, that number one is the end user will expect the OTT to be as good as the linear TV. That is your traditional TV. The OTT that by OTT definition, that there's so many components, and then everyone have to be responsible for their own part, not only the CDN, but also the content owner and the end user and the operator. The best way that we would suggest is you work with the respected all these respective content providers, because you will see that a lot of traffic that is actually surfing to like either cloud providers, CDN providers. Of course, some of the content are directly streamed from the content owner itself, so you have to talk to the content owner about the capacity planning. Yeah, so Akamai, we always improve our software and hardware to deliver the content. And yeah, last but not least, I think we strongly suggest that all the ISP, the operator that co-work with all these content OTT players to make sure that you deliver. But ultimately, it is your end user who consume the content. And if you are an operator, you are actually want to certify with your end user if they. So this is what we suggest. If any questions, yeah, send email to me. If you want a peering with us, we're very welcome. We have an open peering policy. So you can just go to PingDB and then send us a email request. Yeah. But we require you to have a PingDB entry. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr.
I assume no questions? Or, oh. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Cams. I'm Paul from APNIC. You mentioned IPv6 and CGNAT. I'm just wondering if, does Akamai have any idea about performance penalties or relative performance when you're serving content via v4 or v6? Thanks.
Yes. So if you don't have a CGNAT, I think the performance is actually pretty much similar because the transport packet are similar. But if you're comparing a IPv4 with over a CGNAT and a native v6, what we observe is v6 is a little bit better performance because the CGNAT you have to do translation. So there's a lot of a little bit of latency overhead, and also the packet have to translate, right? So there's a packet handling that's usually related to the CGNAT. I mean, the resources, how many sections that they can set up, how many users that they can support. So if we compare native IPv6 and CGNAT IPv4, the native v6 is a little bit better. I think there's like 5 to 10% better where we deliver the v6 natively. Yeah, so yeah, and of course, with peering and cache support v6, if you want to deliver your v6 to an end user, which we strongly encourage, yeah, so if you enable and v6 with Akamai, then yes, come talk to me.
Are there any questions? If not, thank you so much, Mr. Kam Sze Yeung.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. All the slides will be held in the ThaiNOG website. You can download all the times. And the next speaker, I would like to invite Dr. Philip Smith. He is the Senior Network Engineer from Network Startup Resource Center. He is going to talk about RouteViews evolves, modernizations, the BGP correctors for today's researchers. Please welcome.
So I'm going to break everything by using my own laptop. It's all been set up here, so let's see. See if it works. See if I can see. Oh, look at that. Separate display. That one's working. That one's working. Amazing. All right, good morning, everyone. So, yes, this morning I'm here representing the Network Startup Resource Center. And I'd like to give you a little bit of update about RouteViews. I think RouteViews is something either you've heard of because you're a network operator and it's probably your main troubleshooting tool that you've been using since, I don't know, as far as I remember, since time began. I've been using it probably since 96, 97, something like that. It's probably been the original place that anybody goes to check what the routing system is doing, what the routing system is looking like, why you can't get somewhere, even though you're announcing your prefixes, or why certain places in the internet can't get reachability to you. So it's been a vastly useful tool for that. And it's kind of just been carrying on in the background, and people have taken it for granted. A lot of internet organizations, researchers, and so forth are using RouteViews for a lot of the data that they're publishing today. So it's kind of just been there in the background. So what University of Oregon and NSRC are now working on is enhancing RouteViews, extending it a bit, making it more useful for researchers and so forth, and I think modernizing the infrastructure. So, well, let's just wander through some of the slides here. So it's a collaborative router, Looking Glass. A Looking Glass is basically somewhere you can connect to and get a view of what the internet looks like at that particular point. Now remember, I mean, we talked about yesterday and even so far today, the internet looks completely different from whatever point you look at it, right? The BGP table sitting right here in Thailand is different from my hometown in Brisbane, Australia, or at University of Oregon in the United States. It's different wherever we look. And so RouteViews started off in the early years to give network operators a view of the BGP table in different parts of the world. Oh yeah, so there's the date. So RouteViews was founded 1995. Data archives began in 1997. And well, looking at it today, it's about 22 terabytes worth of compressed data that's been stored ever since then. So there's a pretty good historical view of what the routing system has looked like. The group is currently led by the network engineering team at the University of Oregon, so the guys who are running the university's campus network infrastructure, and with support from Network Startup Resource Center, the NSRC. We know what NSRC does. If you're not aware, NSRC supports the growth of global internet infrastructure by doing engineering assistance, mostly for universities, research and education networks, but also some network operation groups around the world. Partially funded by the IRNC program of the NSF. So this is the, I think it's the International Research Network Cooperation. So it's to allow researchers in different parts of the world, usually scientific research, to collaborate around the world. So this is supported by the US National Science Foundation program, and Google has supported it over the years as well, plus a lot of other contributions from public and private organizations. And of course, University of Oregon is university. It's not Oregon State, that's the other university. This is public research institution based in Eugene, Oregon, founded in 1876, so relatively young university, considering where I grew up in Scotland, but been around for a few years in the US. So NSRC is based at University of Oregon since it was founded in the early 90s, and RouteViews is one of the projects that was started off there. So where are the collectors? I don't think it's too easy to see, is it, really? But where you can see the gray outlines of the routers are basically where the collectors are based. So it's not a high dense global infrastructure like some of the other monitoring systems are, but there's sufficient views in strategic locations to let network operators and troubleshooters actually see different BGP views. I mean, the one thing that you've probably noticed that's a bit thin is in our part of the world. I was discussing with BeaconX this morning before we started, so there's interest for BeaconX to actually host one of the RouteView collectors here, which would be a very good thing because it would let all of us have more view of what's happening in Southeast Asia. So we hope that that can come to pass, and we get a node here as well. So you can see they are distributed around the world. So the actual collector locations are there. As you can see, most of them are at internet exchange points. That's where the most useful place for the collector is. Now, it's not at the internet exchange point to find what prefixes are at the IX. You know, there are other ways of getting access to that data. It's located at internet exchange point because most network operators serving either a country or a region will participate at the IX or will be very, very close by. And so the RouteViews host basically encourages, works with the operators present at the exchange to set up a peering session at the IX. And usually that peering session is a full BGP feed for IPv4 and for IPv6. For the peering statistics, well, about 300 million prefixes. That's not the size of the BGP table today. That's the number of prefixes in all the different locations around the world that the collectors are seeing. 833 peering sessions are live at the moment. Well, at least they were this morning when I was checking over breakfast. And 239 different autonomous systems are participating as well. So more peering information is at that URL there. You can click on that one and you can find out the status of all the different peering sessions. You can dig more into those numbers there and find out the status of each RouteViews node and who's peering at it, what's live and what's not. How the collectors work, most of them are typically running on dedicated PC-style hardware, 8 to 16 core, 32, 64 gig RAM, decent size of solid-state disk to store the BGP dumps. Usually running Linux or CentOS or similar Linux-based operating system, Quagga or FRR, typically the BGP processes being used. Some of them are using what we call proprietary hardware. So in this case, a Cisco ASR 1004 running iOS XE. So I think the best known one based at the University of Oregon is actually just a simple Cisco router you can log into and do look at the command line. Actually, I'll break the presentation at some point and just log into it and let you see, if you're not aware of it, let you see what you can actually get there. So the Oregon-based routers has lots of what are called multi-hop BGP sessions. So they're not people based at the exchange point in Eugene, but are getting BGP feeds from all around the world. I mean, as far as I remember, when RouteViews was starting up, it was not long after Links in London, the exchange point in London, had started up. I think I remember this rightly, and we were one of the first to set actually up a RouteViews feed from, was it ourselves or was it from Links? I don't remember, but it was certainly one of the early connections to the RouteViews to provide the BGP feed of what was in the UK back in those days. But that was done by multi-hop, crossing lots of other network operators to provide the routing information at the IX. The nice thing is, if you can get a multi-hop session to the collector, you can provide it with a BGP feed. The downside is you've got lots of other people's infrastructure hiding underneath, and, well, there may be anomalies or other weird things happening in there that, well, you're trying to discover that get lost through the multi-hop. Which is why the Internet Exchange Point is the best place, because then you don't need to do a multi-hop. You can get a physical direct connection to the participants at the IX, or even the participants in the data center where the IX is based. So hence the preference for the IX. Gives us geographic diversity and peering diversity as well. The collector data today, I mean, back in the old days, it was you log into the thing, do a show IP BGP, and it would spit out the whole BGP table that it would actually see, which I'll show you in a second. Today, it's all using MRT. MRT is the multi-threaded routing toolkit. So it's a standard format for doing a BGP dump from a device. And the downside for folks like me who do our own routing analysis, that my own software doesn't use MRT. I still rely on parsing the Cisco iOS output. So MRT is hugely more efficient. It's a binary format, but it's a standard, much more efficient way of shifting large amount of data around. So in RouteViews case, the ribs are dumped every 2 hours. Every 2 hours, MRT will log into the router or it grabs the BGP table out of the BGP daemon, and makes a copy of that. Every 15 minutes, it grabs all the BGP updates. So all the updates that have happened every 15 minutes get noted as well. And then the data files are zipped up and are synced back to the RouteViews archive. So that's a big storage hosted at University of Oregon where all the BGP data is then archived. So you can go to that URL. You can grab it with HTTP, FTP, rsync, whichever suits you best. Now, I'll just break this here and never do live demos, but let's see if I can get lucky. So again, for those of you who haven't seen, so if I do RouteViews right here, now if I move that to here, it should appear on the screen. Oh, it even works. Where did it go? Whoops. Stay there, don't go away. Can you see that? Yeah. So it's, again, it just gives you a standard router prompt. You can do show IP, BGP. And the nice thing is, I've picked up network 1 there. That's the first one you appear in the table. But every single BGP feed that the RouteViews is seeing, so the next hops are basically the IP addresses of the routers it's hearing the BGP feed from. And you see each neighbor that RouteViews has, there's an AS path associated with that. Sorry, I don't have a laser pointer, but you can see the different AS paths. This is hugely valuable for troubleshooting. If your prefix is announced to the internet, you can go to RouteViews and you can see, I don't know how many are here, but 30-something. The 30 different ways you can see network 1.000/24. If your prefix is not there, it's quite likely it's not appearing anywhere in the internet at all. So there are interesting bits and pieces like that. And was one that I picked up earlier just for my own amusement. So where is it? Too many screens. So if I do show IP BGP, that one. And this is the IP address that we have right here in the conference. I think we all are sharing this single IP address. So it's coming out of that /23 block, and it's originated by AS132.280. But what's fascinating about AS132.280 is that they love doing AS path prepends for reasons that I cannot figure out. So they must have read in a book somewhere that doing prepends is a good thing because every single path is prepended. So whoever that AS is, please have a look at your BGP and work out what you're doing. But this is the sort of thing, I'm not picking on that AS on purpose, but this is the sort of thing that a lot of us are using the likes of RouteViews to actually work out what's going on. Why is our traffic engineering not working? I mean, a lot bigger things as well. So that's V4. I mean, this one also has V6. We don't have V6 for this conference, which is a crying shame, but it's got a V6 feed. You can do troubleshooting for the V6 table. You can compare your V4 and V6 paths. They should be symmetric, but again, a lot of operators seem to do V6 kind of half-heartedly. And when it's not symmetric, things go really bad. Okay, so anyway, let's go back to the slides. So that was one example of using RouteViews. So that would be the network operator. I'm not a researcher. That would be the network operator example. It's always been, it's a telnet access. Any troubleshooting I've ever had to do for the last, would be over 20 years now, the first jumping off point is going to RouteViews because it gives me those 30, 40 different BGP feeds from around the world to let me see what's actually going on. Okay, so MRT. Well, MRT is this whole binary thing that is not really very readable by the human eye. So there are a lot of tools available to take that MRT data and actually present it in more readable formats. So again, you can pick your list there of what various researchers and other folks have done over the years to convert this MRT data into something that you can actually use. So whatever scripting that you want to do. So I've just telnetted to the one at University of Oregon. That's the old original main one, that Cisco router. You can log into any of them. No username, well, it says no username, but the Oregon one is the RouteViews username. It usually tells you how to log in. We're not using SSH because there's nothing secret. So it's a simple telnet access. I know that's a challenge for more modern operating systems where telnet has been removed from, at least from Linux and Mac OS. I have no idea about Windows. So telnet has been removed, so you've got to go and dig up a client from somewhere. The data is publicly available. There's nothing to hide at all, and the host management is usually accessed by SSH instead. And remember when I showed the screen earlier, I showed all those next hops, right? The RouteViews collector is not a router. So you can't jump in there. If you do jump in there and do a trace route somewhere, it'll literally just be upstream will be the University of Oregon's backbone network infrastructure. You're not going to be able to follow the paths from the multi-hop BGP. So the forwarding table is meaningless. There isn't one, right? So it's basically just defaulting to University of Oregon backbone. Now, of course, we all know BGP is the backbone of the global routing infrastructure. Without BGP, we would have no internet today. And to ensure its stability, it needs to be monitored. You know, John was talking earlier about monitoring DNS, and that no matter how much you monitor your DNS, it's probably still not enough. So I can ask the same question. How many of you who are running networks monitor your BGP? Probably, okay, I saw 3 hands. So Matt didn't put his hand up, so I'm kind of wondering what's going on at Facebook. Sorry, just kidding. But no, you have to be able to monitor your BGP all the time. And it's not just a case of sitting on your own network and trying to work out what's going on. In all the things I do, the workshops I go to and so forth, the first thing I always do is show people what the internet looks like, jumping onto RouteViews as an example. So RouteViews provides the command line capability. It provides the looking glass, prefix visibility, verifying convergence, your path stability, comparing local, regional, global views, and troubleshooting reachability. The latter one is what I find is probably the most important. Path stability is also very, very important as well. So these are the very common, typical use cases folks are using today. And several organizations will use RouteViews data and other data collected on the internet to provide nice graphical user interfaces to let you work out your connectivity and path stability across the network. And for research as well. So the BGP anomalies and dynamics are also very, very important. What's very important, and we covered this afternoon, is securing the routing infrastructure. But even before we had the focus on securing the routing infrastructure, looking at this data to try and figure out things about BGP hijacks, route leaks, and so forth, was very, very important for the daily network operation. Monitoring the network topology, optimizing your own infrastructure or what you're doing, your traffic engineering, growth, aggregation, or the lack of it. I mean, you know about the CIDR report, which Jeff Houston does. Some of you probably know the routing report thing that I do. That's all looking at growth of the routing system V4 and V6, and the aggregation, or the lack of it, and the increasing lack of it as is happening around the network. There are over 500 research publications have been using RouteViews data, and so you can read about some of those at that URL there. Right, so this is really the current RouteViews. So it's file-based storage, MRT data format. It's asynchronous, manual retrieval, sequencing, consolidation. There's quite a lot of manual work going on here. There's not any post-processing. Basically, the dumps are there, they're stored, and the research community and the network operations community is pretty much asked to go help itself. Very centralized model. As you saw, all the data is dropped onto archive.routeviews.org. Whereas what the team are now looking to do in a suppose the second generation version, the new improved version, is to try and introduce message-based data distribution, per message timestamps, metadata, and so forth. Make it a bit more useful, a bit more scalable longer term. Automated consolidating and sequencing. I'm just reading out the list of what they've put here. Database storage and access, so better storage means, and what are called RESTful interfaces. I didn't actually know what REST was, so I had to look it up, but representational state transfer. So in other words, something a bit more formal about how you get data from interfaces or to devices and so forth, rather than just what's happening right now. Real-time streaming telemetry. Also this middle layer abstraction, multi-client access, again, just to make it easier. I think this is another way of describing a proper API, right? A proper API to the actual RouteViews data infrastructure. And RPKI validation. You may have noticed there isn't any RPKI state thing being listed on RouteViews at the moment. So one thing that I've certainly been pushing for is to try and get not an action, so not route origin validation as such to indicate, so dropping prefixes that are invalid, but to actually indicate the raw state for every prefix that it learns. So adding that in will again be a useful tool for researchers. What else? So better communications for those who are interested in what's going on at RouteViews. I think there's a mailing list at the moment, but better communication with users means so users know about any maintenance that's happening, any outages, any collector announcements, and so forth. There's the steering committees, so that's going to be better governance for it. At the moment, it's just a small team, but show the steering committee to make sure that RouteViews carries on meeting the needs of the community. So basically taking feedback from the community, enhancements that go in, prioritizations, and so forth. And this steering committee will include members of the ops community as well as researchers, as researchers on it. Next step will also be to support BMP, the BGP monitoring protocol, again, standardized by IETF. That's available on Cisco, on Juniper's FRR is coming. So that's like MRT, but has more. So BMP will add start, stop, peer up, peer down, collector identification, and more statistics about the BGP feed. So that is a standard. And the IETF standard for BGP monitoring. Open BMPD is open source, so it's part of the Linux Foundation. So that will let RouteViews consolidate peers, collectors, and so forth. And then there's the Apache Kafka, comprising a message bus for OpenBMT. If you know about some of this, you'll know where this is all heading to. I don't, but again, this is again requested by a lot of members in the research community, and is to try and make the data available from RouteViews in a more, I suppose, consistent, more standard format. So just having a look at some of the graphics with OpenBMP. I don't think you can see that because I can't see it on my slides here either. But it just shows the architecture. It's taken from the GitHub project for OpenBMP, showing basically the architecture of OpenBMP. And then BGP Stream, that's held under CADA, which is an open source software framework for live and historical BGP data analysis. So you can jump to that page and see what CADA is trying to do with that. And then if you want to know more about what Kafka is and the language is supported, you can have a look at the Apache website listed there. So I think that's probably the overall mission of what RouteViews is trying to do. So basically to give researchers more and new opportunities to do BGP anomaly detection, looking at and doing dynamics analysis. So what's happening, what's changing in the BGP table. So move the thing along from what was first put together in the mid-90s. So can possibly use, I don't know, I think, well, David Teach, who leads the project at University of Oregon, was putting some of the thoughts that he was collecting from around the net. So, using RouteViews for machine learning, so supervised learning, training models to better detect route leaking, hijacking, infrastructure appearing outages, internet censorship, routing policy complexity, and then validating some of these machine learning models against live BMP streams. So I think this is just some of the future gazing, future possibilities that could come out with the much enhanced RouteViews. Anyway, so as I say, if you're interested in hosting one, I've asked BKNix if they're interested in hosting a collector here, but if there is an interest about hosting a collector for RouteViews, it's not a massive system. It's like a small appliance server. And basically, it's not just a case of it's a box just sitting there that you ignore. The host for RouteViews has to work with the peers at the IX. Ideally, it's to get a full BGP feed from the IX member onto the RouteViews box, because that will then give researchers and network operators a view of what the BGP table looks like in, well, wherever the collector is hosted. So like the example that I showed you on the screen earlier. So that's pretty much the update. Any questions about anything of that? John?
So firstly, I would encourage the local exchange point. Firstly, I'm very happy there is an exchange point in Thailand now. Awesome. I would encourage them to look at hosting RouteViews because it's a very useful tool. What's the time frame on the next gen, and what do you see as the road bumps, the bumps in the road on the way up? How do we get there?
Well, David Teach and the others at University of Oregon are working on it already. But I think at the moment, it's, I'm asked, please do this presentation in Asia because we need more visibility of our RouteViews devices here. So I think it's work in progress, but I don't know what the roadmap looks like or the time frame looks like.
So it's U of O rather than NSRC. So talk to David.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's NSRC supporting it, so it's we get pulled in to help out as well. So it's a joint project because it's trying to resurrect it from the folks in the past who were looking after it. Well, mentioning some of the names in the past, but it's very much David Teach now. So,
are there any more questions from the floor? Okay, if not, thank you so much, Dr. Philip. The next one, I would like to invite all three speakers in this morning on the stage, and I would like to invite Associate Professor Dr. Panjai Tantatsanawong to present the gift to all the speakers. The first one is Mr. John Crain. The next one, Mr. Kam Sze Yeung. And the next one is Dr. Philip. Thank you. The next one is going to the time that you are waiting for. I would like to wake you up from a cup of espresso and a piece of croissant. But before we are going to have the coffee breaks, I would like to invite all of you to have a good photo together. Please welcome all of you to the front. Yes. Good photo, please. Please enjoy your coffee breaks. We will be back within 15 minutes here. Thank you.
How are you doing? So I miss you.